March of last year, I moved into a completely new neighborhood in a new city, and I'm in love. My class picked up a project dedicated to the symbiotic relationship you have with your neighborhood. It's a perfect time to elaborate my feelings about my own neighborhood and to show off my home life. Home is the most important part of everyone's life. Even if you don't have a home, having no home is a home. To me, my neighborhood feels relaxed, quiet, and a sort of pristine humbleness. So I wanted to use a lot of modern tones, like beiges and grays and blacks, which make up the majority of my neighborhood. The simplicity of modern architecture summarizes the feel of my neighborhood. Even though the houses are quite old, it gives off a rich feeling, the same feeling I get from my own home. I want to portray warm skies for outside areas like the pool and the park. Anytime I go for a walk, it is around 6 p.m. when the sun sets, so the warm tones are a must-have. My medium was markered and colored pencils. Basically, I went in with the marker and touched up with pencils. I tried to go for this simplistic / messy look to establish the humble feel, but I feel like it was too messy and it was an overall struggle. I still think it has the humble storybook vibes, though.
My artwork contains snippets of my neighborhood. I've never moved from the house I live in now, and the houses have never really changed. My neighborhood isn't very lively, but people passing by usually say a quick hello or good morning and so on. But aside from birds, the occasional loud barking of dogs, kids playing in their driveways, and people who just want to take a stroll, there's not much that goes on in my neighborhood at a first glance. However, mostly because I've lived in this neighborhood for forever, it has a nostalgic vibe to it. Once you live in a place long enough, you begin to recognize the people who walk by, or the cats in the neighborhood, like how I have noticed. They're little things, but they make the neighborhood feel a little bit more lively, since I'm aware of the people and certain pets that roam around. Noticing the little things makes everything feel more expansive and welcoming.
There's a variety of vibes, themes, and features that one will notice if you walked on my street. Though there are many, here are a few of my favorites. On the first page, there's a flag to represent how, whatever the season or holiday it is, these neighbors always have a flag to match it. A big tomato and a fountain too, because the people who live in that home grow the best tomatoes on my street. They've also got an amazing water fountain that is very satisfying to hear. The final symbols worth mentioning are the hearts and flowers, which represent the immense amount of kindness here. A great deal of smiles will be seen throughout the day. Mediums I used were mainly colored pencils and watercolor. I also debated using a permanent marker to make it all pop, and it was a good decision. Problems I encountered in the making of this book are how I used way too much water in the sky. To solve this, I colored the area in with a darker colored pencil. So now the sky has a sort of ombre to it, and I gradually started to like it more and more. It was an interesting process making this book, and I really do like how it turned out.
My mini book features a small park, 2 houses, and a street filled with symbols representing the people of my neighborhood. I use symbols that would immediately make my brain associate with the said person, such as a bike for a person I call the biking man. I purposely used bright colors and thick lines that I wouldn't normally use to try and emulate a bright, cartoony feel. I guess I wanted to show how things looked like when I was younger, like when I was in kindergarten or first grade, which was definitely more colorful than how I see the world now. I colored my mini book with colored pencils and a set of markers, which made it look more clean and solid. Like I mentioned before, I wanted a cartoony style for my mini book, so I used hatching and cross-hatching on houses and streets. I actually faced an art block with this mini book and was procrastinating for about 2 weeks until inspiration struck as I was taking a bike ride around my neighborhood. I probably erased and redrew my entire mini book 5 times before I was finally somewhat satisfied with my work.
In my mini book, I wanted to keep the colors of the symbols realistic while experimenting with the sky. Admittedly, the horse is a bit random. However, it represents a small school located in my area. It's one of the most noticeable landmarks of my community, as they have horses and goats. Through my neighborhood, I'm trying to express the beauty and normality. While my neighborhood doesn't have the most compelling features, it still has its own personality created by its citizens. My main medium is watercolor, and I use an ultrafine pen for the outline details. I went with this decision for more simplicity. However, I also use cotton balls for the clouds and colored them with food coloring for a more magical effect. I ran into a problem with controlling the watercolor, so it was my first time using it and gluing the cotton, but handled them with experimentation and perseverance.
To express the vibes, the immaculate view of my neighborhood, I did not express it through writing but through art. I imagined myself walking through my neighborhood on an average midday, the bright sun shining overhead and the chattering of my neighbors. From swaying palm trees to jingling bikes, the symbols are here to represent and express my art full of vibrant colors, like the color of a baby robin expressing the midday sensation. A splash of watercolor here and a drip of ink there to convey the feel of a true painting of distant memories. There are times when the watercolor splashed and the ink smudged, but overcoming these small obstacles were not a dilemma for me. As these obstacles may come, they are what made my art better
My
overall.
drawing of a walk down my street shows the moment of my street. I used various images and colors in my neighborhood, such as a pleasing shading for the sky, a mix of rose and sky blue. I utilized various animals with many traits for symbol. My family is shown as a dog, royal. Sara's family is bear, courage. Krishna's family is a sloth, calm. And a speech bubble shows Rosaria's family, talkative. And a quokka, cheerful for Terry's family. I also added a change since the death of an elder with rainbow over rain. I drew a dove, harmony, in my street and roses to extract the sweet smell. I added a cup of coffee to show that my road is active. I used the medium watercolors to present my street, since they can create unique paintings that are great for details. I had to face some difficulties during my ideation, such as short time and low self-esteem. So for aid, I enhanced speed and found ways to value my art.
The drawing of my neighborhood is pretty normal and calm. There's a lot of plants, trees, kids, and simple houses. Not much going on. The meaning behind the symbols and colors I chose was to represent my neighborhood. I drew sport balls for kids, skates for teens, rain for middle-aged, a crescent moon for elders, and a dove for my neighbor. I drew a lot of leaves and trees to represent the landmarks, which are a circle of different plants, a very tall tree, and a mushroom pathway. For the vibe, I drew a rainbow to represent the feel of the neighbor and how sometimes my area is loud but always calms down just like a rainbow. I chose green as the main color because we have a lot of things that are green. What I'm trying to express is how positive my neighbor is. The choices I made in terms of medium and content are I know what media I'm most good at, which is markers and color pencils. I chose these because I have some experience with them, but not a lot. Also because I have a lot of brush markers right now, so I thought it would be a good idea to use them for this project. While I was working, I mainly used markers because the color pencils weren't that much of a use. One of the problems I had with my art was that the school fine liner was very thick and it blended like a marker, but I quickly solved it by just using my own.
My art is portraying my neighborhood. The first house on the first page being the start of my street, the last house being my own house. I'm trying to express that my neighborhood is quiet and empty. My neighborhood has very different houses with different colors and design. That's why I tried to make my neighborhood look very accurate. I chose to use watercolor and line art. I was never good at watercolor, but looking at other people use it made me think I could. It was very challenging because no one can control water. If you use too much water and move, the ball of colored water will move. Colors will blend into each other with too much water. I made those mistakes countless times while in the process of making my art. I got a napkin and dried the most areas with water and got over it. Overall, making this art was fun because I rarely draw houses or buildings and tried stuff for the first time.
My artwork, A Walk Down My Street, is exactly what the name says. It shows what's in my neighborhood or what's special in my neighborhood. Some symbols like the plate of cookies is an example of my neighbor. She baked us cookies before and they tasted so good that I felt the need to include it. I use mellow tones in my art because I feel like there's never too much or too little happening here in Tanglewood. From my book, I want the viewers to be able to feel what it's like to live here and take a walk down my street. In my book, I use watercolor and fine line pens. I picked these because I want to try new things as I haven't used watercolor much before. And I felt the neighborhood vibe here is very soft like watercolor. Some challenges I encountered were that using watercolor is not very easy. I'm not very experienced in this medium, which made it even harder. But I overcame these obstacles by asking my teacher for help and persevering.
I remember when I first moved into my new house in 2016. I did not feel like I belonged. I wanted to go back to my cozy little apartment back in LA where all my friends were. I noticed everything different in my neighborhood. There were bumps, huge curves, very quiet, and a lot of my neighbors forcing me to eat a lot. The very deep bump where when we crossed our neighborhood felt like we were on a roller coaster. It was so deep. I represented this in my art by showing an abyss full of creatures. As we passed the bump, there were my neighbors holding out food for me to eat. They love to cook, and my parents are good friends with them, so they sometimes bring us some food. Their kids are very friendly. I became best friends with them very soon. I loved playing soccer and basketball with them. I will represent this photo by drawing a basketball hoop and a soccer ball. There is a huge corner turn in my neighborhood. That corner turns into a different street than ours. This corner I almost never go near because I don't know anybody there or about the neighborhood there. I represent this as a huge brick wall separating the two sides. My neighborhood is also very quiet and cozy. This makes me feel really comfortable now. Before, I did not like it because in LA there is a lot of noise and I am not used to the quiet. I am representing this by drawing a nice, chill sky and a bed. My neighborhood feels so much safer than when I was the new kid back in 2016. I would not want to let go of this neighborhood and the cool characteristics of it.
As a brief symbolism of my neighborhood. My neighborhood has a very warm community, so I really want to express that through this booklet. My neighborhood has very warm people also. I've been here all my life, so there's a very nostalgic feeling when I step into this neighborhood. Just the feeling of thinking about my neighbors makes me happy because they have always been really kind. I choose certain colors in order to try to express the nostalgic feeling in my neighborhood. There's a meaning behind why I made the sky yellow. It is a symbolism of a warm and peaceful neighborhood. I also use very light colors in general because I wanted to convey a warm, happy, nostalgic feeling. For my process, I decided to use a medium that will bring out light and warm colors. Therefore, I decided to use watercolor as my medium. This is my booklet.